Have you heard of Usher syndrome? It's a rare hidden condition that affects 4 to 17 per 100,000 people. This is what a person with Usher syndrome goes through. Usher syndrome is a condition that affects some people who are born deaf predominantly, and it's when the eye condition retinitis pigmentosa comes to somebody who's born either profoundly or moderately deaf, and they lose their vision over time. Usher syndrome is diagnosed in some different ways. Sometimes it's diagnosed in a very young child when they're going forward for cochlear implants by looking at their retina. But usually Usher 1 and Usher 2 are diagnosed when teenagers or young adults start to struggle to see in certain conditions, like when it's dark or when they're trying to see things round to the...
I was diagnosed when I was 14 years old.
There are traditionally 3 different types of Usher syndrome, but as we learn more about it, we know that those 3 types don't always match the genetics, and we're actually learning more about what those 3 types mean. Type 1 is traditionally when somebody who is born profoundly deaf develops an eye condition in their teens or 20s and stops being able to see as well. Type 2 is when somebody who is born moderately deaf starts to develop visual issues in their 20s. And type 3 is when somebody who may have had a mild hearing impairment or not known they'd had a hearing impairment when they were younger develops both hearing and visual problems, maybe in their 30s or 40s.
When did I lose my hearing? So, because I'm type 1, I'm profoundly deaf, so I was born deaf, which I didn't actually know until I was 14.
People's vision with retinitis pigmentosa can deteriorate at very different speeds. So some people might lose a lot of vision very quickly and actually need to do things very differently from the time they're 20. But other people will lose their vision much more gradually. It will have a much slower effect as their eye condition develops over time, and they might have a lot of useful vision into their 40s or 50s or even beyond that and never lose their vision altogether. So as people's vision gets worse, what happens first of all is that they aren't able to see so well in the dim conditions and in the dark. Obviously none of us can see in the dark, but we can usually see when it's quite dim, when the lights aren't very good. People with Usher syndrome really struggle with that.
I started losing my vision in the dark around 9, I think. Yeah, 9, because I kept holding on to everyone, like my nan, my mum, everyone, and they kept going to me, "Oh, Chloe, you need to eat some carrots."
And they gradually, their vision deteriorates from the sides so that they can't see so far round about them, to the left, the right and up and down. And that changes so that the tunnel of vision that they can see becomes much smaller and smaller until they can only see things perhaps right in front of them and quite close.
I haven't lost my eyesight because I still can see. So but I do miss quite a few bits. So I'm always falling over. Literally, I'm like the most clumsiest person you ever meet because I've got severe balance problems, which is to do with Usher syndrome.
There isn't at the moment a cure for retinitis pigmentosa and therefore for Usher syndrome. People are working on this, and there's a lot of research going on into Usher syndrome and retinitis pigmentosa, but there's no cure for it at the moment. And also they are looking at retinal implants, which are ways of stimulating the retina directly electronically, which might help to bypass the effect of the damaged retinal cells, but that's experimental at the moment. People with Usher syndrome change what they're doing in relation to how fast their vision's deteriorating and when things are right for them. So they might start to use a long cane, a guide cane, to help to get them to get about if their vision's deteriorated, or a guide dog. Most people stick to the communication framework that they've used before. So if they were speaking before their vision deteriorated, they'll go on speaking all their lives. And if they used BSL, they'll go on using BSL. Some people with Usher 3 may decide to learn BSL as their hearing deteriorates as well. And some people will decide to learn to use Braille at a later stage if they're not able to read as well as they once were, read text.